What's going on, YouTube and basketball fans? This is Athletic Academics with another episode of the Mr. Basketball Reviews, where we're taking our chances as an acting GM or owner of an NBA franchise and looking into opportunities to remain competitive for the following season. If you haven't by now, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel so you're up to date when new videos come out. Leave any comments or thoughts in the comment section, and of course, as always, spread the love and share the basketball videos within the basketball community. Also, you can find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram at The Athletic Academic and Twitter at Athledemic. So episode 4 brings us to the Atlanta Hawks. What's on the table? Same thing as always. Quick overview of the team and what impacted them this past season, as well as their performance as a team. Then taking a dive into the head coach, franchise players, and the rest of the team roster. Analyzing the team financially and assessing any moves they can make in free agency in the NBA draft. And closing out with our future projections on the team. A review into the Hawks season. 20 wins, 47 losses, missed the playoffs for the third consecutive season. It's been a challenging rebuild for the Hawks these past few seasons, as they were 27th in the league, 14th in their conference, and dead last in their division. So a more detailed look into what impacted the Hawks this past season? Well, they started the season with a tough blow as John Collins was suspended for 25 games for in violation of the NBPA's anti-drug rules. It's not the drugs you're thinking about. He was caught with some growth hormones from a supplement he had taken. On another note, the Hawks were hit with a field of injuries. Evan Turner, DeAndre Bembry, and Jabari Parker all missed over 20 games. Franchise player Trae Young missed 11 games, which he's basically all of the Hawks offense. And the 3 prize rookies from the past draft missed 7 games from various injuries each. Another tough challenge for the Hawks is their growing pains from the youth and inexperience they hold. Mind you, they have the youngest starting roster in the league with an average age of 21.2 years of age. They had some seriously bad moments of inconsistency and level of effort, even being called out by their coach during a bad loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. There were a lot of changes to the Hawks roster throughout the season, as former players Alex Len and Jabari Parker were traded to the Sacramento Kings. Evan Turner was traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Hawks welcomed back Jeff Teague and Dwayne Dedmon. And their toughest challenge is though people look at the Hawks as a young team on the rise, outside of Vince Carter's veteranship that he gave the team, there wasn't a leader on this team at all. Trae Young has the skill and potential to be the leader for this team, but during a supposed blowout in the team locker room after a bad string of losses, and how no one really came to his side during the Trevor Ariza incident, yeah, Bruno Fernando came to the side, but he really didn't do that much. It just adds on the issues or the image the Hawks have. So how did the Hawks perform on offense this past season? Well, not too hot. 25th in the league in offensive rating. As you can see, Trae Young led them in some of the most important offensive stats. And at times it did look like a one-man show. They didn't do great in any single one category, but they did do fine in their free throws, which I do like to see from young teams. But my biggest call-outs here is their bad shooting and their bad turnovers. The Hawks were one of the worst shooting teams in the league, as they were 23rd in the NBA in field goal percentage, dead last in three-point percentage, and literally one of the worst teams in turnovers per game. How can the Hawks get better on the offensive end? Well, for starters, they can limit the turnovers, but that's easier than it sounds, because to the next point, the Hawks need additional playmakers and shot creators. Too much pressure is on Trae Young on this offense, where he has to play Superman. And although Trae's very gifted on the offensive end, he can't carry this much of an offensive burden. And when he's off the court, it goes to the third point. They need shooting depth, especially within their second unit. I can imagine one of the most frustrating moments for a star player is watching your lead shrink to nothing or losing a lead while you're on the bench for a breather. The Hawks have some young players that I think will develop into fine shooters, but they could probably do some good by looking in the upcoming free agency market or the draft. Just in case, you can never have too many good shooters. Also, keep the fast pace. The Hawks were 7th in the league in average pace. The more possessions, the more chances to win. And finally, the Hawks are just a very young team. They need time to develop. This is not going to be an overnight rebuild. Patience is key. Now to the other side of the floor, the Hawks defense. They ranked 28th in the league with a defensive rating at 114.4. Man, this is kind of depressing. Look, the Hawks haven't done much on defense. Let's just go to the opportunities. Look, I don't ever expect the Hawks to be stellar at defense, but they got to do something. Like, they have to do something. And Travis Schlenk and the crew actually did. With all the issues they've had in the paint, with all the issues they've had in protecting the paint, as well as overall defense, the Hawks made a crucial trade for Clint Capella from the Rockets before the trade deadline. The Rockets were willing to trade Capella to open up more driving lanes for Westbrook, who can't shoot. But after the Rockets' most recent playoff exit, it's clear they're probably going to miss the presence of Capella. And the Hawks now found a defensive anchor, because Capella not only can guard the paint, but he's even able to switch on the guards during pick and rolls pretty well. And hopefully his experience with battles in the playoffs with the Rockets can help bring this team some more competitive fire. The Hawks need a player that can act as their motor. The Warriors have Draymond, the Clippers have Pat Bev, and the Miami Heat have Jimmy Butler, so the Hawks need to figure that out. I also should have said this earlier, back to the turnovers. The Hawks lead so many turnovers that it's hurting them in the back end. They were 28th in the league in opponents' points scored off of turnovers. And just goes to the running theme that this Hawks team just needs time to develop. So who is the person behind the Hawks youth development? That man is Lloyd Pierce. Pierce just finished his second year as a head coach after running as an assistant the last several years in the NBA. Though so far he's had some challenges, carrying a .329 win percentage. Pierce is known as a developer of players, and he's given the players on the Hawks franchise a good leash to work with and build their skills. His focus on culture is evident, and he's been one of the more active head coaches throughout the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And one thing I like about Pierce is that whenever the team doesn't do well, he will take accountability on the things that he can do better. He's not afraid to fall on the sword. So opportunity areas, of course, is that he just completed his second year as a head coach, so he is a little bit inexperienced. He's still learning as a head coach, and at times can be too conservative with his play calling, but I can't blame him because he's dealing with a young team that has been hit with a lot of injuries and in-season trades, so the roster hasn't been consistent. And as weird as it is, there might be some tension with him and Trae Young because he didn't vouch for him to get on Team USA. I don't think it was a big deal, but some other people think it was, so who knows? We just have to consider it. And that brings us to the franchise player, Trae Young. The young player turning a lot of heads who many didn't think he would be this successful this fast. He was a 2020 All-Star, a starter at that, and he had the most votes for any guard in the East. And last year, he would have won Rookie of the Year had it not been for a gentleman named Luka Doncic. Forever Trae Young's ghost. But this past season, Trae put in work. He was 4th in the NBA in points per game, 2nd in the NBA in assists, and also free throws made, which I want to point that out right there because the saying has always been young players don't get calls, but Trae Young is getting 8 free throws a game. This is a gem for the Hawks team if they can get it right with Trae, because he's such a cerebral player with a high IQ. Trae has an arsenal of scoring moves, a highly skilled and highly confident player. Yes, he's compared to Curry a lot because of his ability to shoot the long ball, but he's not nearly as efficient as Steph was this early in his career. He shoots 36% on over 9 3-point attempts a game, though he could have probably been more efficient had he had more help on offense. But the thing I really like about Trae Young is his passing and playmaking, which may be his best skill, which is why he's very similar to Steve Nash, who he has stated multiple times is the player he has modeled his game after. But if Trae is going to be compared to some of the greatest that have ever played the game, he has to work on his turnovers. He led the league in turnovers at almost 5 a game because, as we know, they don't have many offensive weapons around him and the various roster changes that occur throughout the year. Trae also needs to develop an off-ball movement game. He can take a lot of pages from Steph Curry's book or even Rip Hamilton for that matter, but it would open the door for other playmakers on the team and bring an extra level of potency to the Hawks offense that they desperately need. And unfortunately, we know about Trae's deficiencies on the defensive end. He's one of the worst defenders in the league, but I think he can get some ground by actually playing the passing lanes and working on the steals. But overall, I think Trae is exactly who the Hawks need and vice versa. The Hawks roster this offseason looks pretty good. No bad contracts and some pretty good flexibility. They do have some players whose contracts are up for discussion, starting with Jeff Teague. I probably don't bring him back because although he's a capable veteran, he may command for more of a contract than he's worth. And he didn't show me much in his second stint with the Hawks. Then there's DeAndre Bembry. This is a sad one because Bembry is a pretty good player when he's healthy. He just can't stay on the floor because of all the injury bugs he's had. Damian Jones gotta go. Sorry, I thought he was going to do a little bit more with the Hawks, but I thought wrong. To players I'd keep, Trayvon Graham would be good insurance at the guard position. I'd keep Scalabrine because although he hasn't lived up to the hype that he had in high school, he still holds a lot of potential and he has developed, and Travis Schlenk has had him on his radar for a long time and he finally got him. And there is one interesting thing we have to talk about. It's John Collins. I know some Hawks fans don't like to hear this, but we'll talk about this in a moment. But first, we have to review the Hawks' financial outlook. So with the league salary cap maximum set at $109.1 million, the Hawks have 9 players under contract so far next year, totaling $57.9 million. With no dead money, they hold $58.3 million in player salary cap holds, which totals their team salary allocations to $111.8 million, or just $2.6 million above the league salary cap maximum, which is 4th in the NBA. So that's one half of the Hawks' financial outlook. Let's look at the second half, the luxury tax report. So next year's luxury tax threshold is set at $132.6 million. From the last slide, we know the Hawks have $57.9 million in taxable salaries, and the team salary cap holds don't count against them in the luxury tax because they're over the league salary cap maximum, which means the Atlanta Hawks have $74.7 million in luxury tax space this offseason, which is number 1 in the league. The Hawks are in the perfect situation for a rebuilding team. It doesn't get better than this. But that being said, they have some key upcoming contracts to look at, and the main player in focus is the hardworking big man in John Collins. So who is John Collins? A player I have a lot of respect for. Since he entered the league in 2017, he has grown his game year after year. He even built himself a three-point shot, which he did not have during his time at Wake Forest. This past year, he averaged almost 22 points per game, 40% on three-point shooting with 3.6 attempts a game, 10 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks a game. Collins is a highly productive big man who operates great in a pick and roll. A pick and roll with Trae Young and John Collins is one of the most deadly plays in the league. Collins is a great rim runner in transition, and to take a good point that I saw from Sporting Logically's page, there have only been 5 players in the NBA's history who have averaged 20 points, 10 rebounds, 3 three-point attempts a game, and 35% from 3. Kevin Love, DeMarcus Cousins, Joel Embiid, Karl-Anthony Towns 4 times, and John Collins. So some of Collins' deficiencies, he's not a good playmaker at all. He does his job, and he does it well, as limited or simple as it may be. He's not a great defender, although he's improved, it's not his calling card. He's not a good ball handler, and above else, we don't know how he's going to fit with Capella, and a shortened season hurt our chance of seeing that early. So let's put our emotions aside. Why would I consider trading Collins? It's because as good as Collins is, I don't think he's worth a max contract, but he believes he is. He doesn't solve enough answers for me to give him a max contract, and it's no secret why the Hawks have been hesitant to extend him. The Hawks answered their defensive issues with Clint Capella, who is also a great rim runner and lob threat. Collins' value is at its highest, and if I'm not ready to give him a max contract, I can shop him around for some things I really need, and Minnesota has been rumored to really like John Collins, who just happens to have the number 1 pick in this coming draft. And there's a playmaker and shot creator in this draft that would be perfect for the Hawks, even though he's unproven right now. But I would trade John Collins in a 2021 first-round pick via OKC to Minnesota for that number 1 pick. I think Collins is that valuable. Now, if I trade him, that means I need to find somebody who would really help me in my areas of need. And since I desperately need shooting, the guy I'm looking at is Davis Bertans. Davis had a breakout year with the Wizards, scoring 15 points per game, 3.7 three-pointers made on 8.7 attempts, which was 4th in the NBA on 42% three-point shooting. He reminds me a lot of Kyle Korver, except taller and better playmaking skills. The dude is a sharp shooter from every sense of the word. He's great in transition shooting. He can pull up right when he comes down the court. His off-ball movement is excellent. It's exactly what the Hawks need. And I stated earlier, although he's not the best playmaker, he's very capable and he's unselfish. So his weaknesses, of course, are his defense. He's not a very quick player, especially laterally. He lacks strength and elite athleticism. And his performance could be inflated because remember, this was a terrible Wizards team that was lacking John Wall, but they were one of the teams that made it to the bubble, but he did not play. He's in a contract year, so I understood why he didn't. And he has some injury history. Unlike Collins, who's been pretty reliable, Davis has 2 torn ACLs in both of his knees, but he's been fairly healthy since. He answers a lot of my issues. I would probably go for him. Now, there's one more player I would target in free agency, and that's Chris Dunn. I hope that doesn't shock you because he answers a lot of the Hawks' need in the backup point guard department. See, the Hawks need good players, but they need players that fit within the age range of their young core. The Hawks desperately need a backup point guard to Trae Young. They need one that can back up Trae's defensive liabilities. And they need that guy that's going to be their motor. The blue-collar, nitty-gritty person who's going to do the things that don't count in the stat sheet. And you can get this player at a good value, put them together, you get Chris Dunn. Now, Dunn hasn't really lived up to his lofty expectations coming out of his draft in 2016, but he's become a very serviceable point guard. What stands out to me is his steals per game. He was second in the NBA in steals per game, and even though he missed the final 14 games of the year, he still finished 10th in total steals in the league. He's a ball hawk that lives on the defensive end. In this past year, he was second on the team in defensive rating at Chicago at 103.9. Technically, he was first because the top player only played 11 minutes a game, but nonetheless, Dunn is a staunch defender who's also a capable playmaker. His weaknesses, though, he can't shoot at all. He shoots 26% from three-point land, he can play out of control at times, and his injury history does concern me. He played 78 games in his rookie year, but since then, he hasn't played more than 52 games in a season. And hopefully this stage of his career, he's willing to accept the role player position because even with his weaknesses, I think he's exactly who the Hawks need at backup point guard position. So let's talk about the Hawks and their draft assets. They have the 6th pick in the draft, and I'm viewing this as if I'm trading John Collins. If I can still keep that 6th pick in the Collins trade, I'm going with Obi Toppin. In many ways, he's a carbon copy of John Collins, and I'm getting him at a better value on a rookie scale contract. If none of this works out, then I'm going with Tyrese Halliburton to pair next to Trae Young. But going back to the Collins trade, if I do get that number 1 pick, I'm getting Anthony Edwards. So let's speak about Anthony Edwards, a big, strong, athletic guard who has an array of moves and can get his shot at any time, that also carries some efficiency issues. His 1 year at Georgia, he scored 19 points per game, which is first against NCAA freshmen, but he took about 16 shots per game. Half of those came from three-point land, and he only shot 29% from three, and scouts have their concerns on his long-term shooting. I just go back to the explosion he had against Michigan State, where he scored 37 points in the second half and almost upset the number 2 Michigan State team. And also, I don't know if many people knew this, but yes, he did take a lot of bad shots his freshman year, but he played on a team of 9 freshmen, and not your Kentucky or Duke freshmen. But I really like his ideal fit next to Trae Young, because although he was spotty on defense in Georgia, if he goes to the Hawks, he won't be asked to do as much as he did at UGA because he has Trae Young, which means although he'll have his abilities to create his own shot, he'll also be used as a defender as well, which he has shown great potential when he's focused. The Hawks don't have a major player at shooting guard. Kevin Huerter's solid, but I would move him to the bench role. Same thing with Cam Reddish. I wouldn't put Cam Reddish in the starting 2-guard role because Reddish operates better with the ball in his hands. Put Reddish and Huerter in the second unit where they can help the team from getting gouged when their starters are on the bench. And I think this is important. This is a great thing because the league is all about depth now. Look at the Clippers. Their 2 6th and 7th men in Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell average almost 20 points per game. This is a perfect solution. So what teams can the Hawks learn from historically? I gotta go with the 05-06 Phoenix Suns. That Suns team helped transform the NBA into what it is today due to their 7 seconds or less offense. They were number 1 in the NBA in offensive rating, three-point shooting and assists, and pace. Trae Young would fill the role of Steve Nash perfectly. You have John Collins or Obi Toppin who would run as your Amari Stoudemire, and you have a talent of wings around you. Current teams the Hawks can learn from. The Toronto Raptors. Why? Because of a few things. They're a great set of team defenders. They were number 2 in the league in defensive rating. They have developed their talent and the culture of their organization in a way that's very similar to the San Antonio Spurs. And a team to avoid is the 2017-2018 Minnesota Timberwolves. That team had serious issues in leadership and chemistry. They made that risky trade for Jimmy Butler, who clashed with the young players on the team because they didn't work hard enough. And the front office tried to rush the development of the team, and it backfired on them. So, my outlook for the Hawks, 43 wins, 39 losses, which is middle of the pack in the league standings, 7th in the conference, and 2nd in their division behind the Miami Heat. I think this would answer a lot of their issues. They would make the playoffs as a 7th or 8th seed, a first-round exit, but a promising future for a young core of players. So that concludes episode 4 of the Mr. Basketball Review starring the Atlanta Hawks. Before you go, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you can be aware when new videos come out. Share your feedbacks and comments in the comment section, and continue to share the videos around in the basketball community. We'll work together to see where this channel can go. You can also follow me on social media, Facebook and Instagram at The Athletic Academic, and Twitter at Athledemic. Thank you so much for your support. This is Athletic Academics, and I'll see you next time.